Hello, all, and welcome back to another episode of Movies and Us, a weekly gathering place filled with conversations about movies, stories, and connection. My name is Jennifer Hahn.
And I'm Sarah Callan.
And today we are going to be reviewing the film The Favorite. I am excited for this one. We have been wanting to watch this movie for many, many years, and the time has finally come where we're going to get to talk about this movie. So, Sarah, kick us off with an IMDb summary for The Favorite.
In early 18th century England, the status quo at the court is upset when a new servant arrives and endears herself to a frail Queen Anne.
Okay. Gosh, this is going to be such a fascinating discussion. I'm buckling on my seatbelt because we're about to go on a whole journey with our thoughts about this film and unpacking so many of the aspects of it. So let's start off in Movies and Us tradition with our one-sentence summaries for The Favorite. Sarah, what is yours?
Mine is, you come at the Queen, you best not miss.
Oh, that's so good. Oh my gosh. Wow, that's one of my favorite ones as of late that you've hit us with. Man.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
yeah. Thank
played.
you, The Wire,
Well
for that one.
Yeah. Although Avon Barksdale could not be from a different world than this one. So that's hilarious. It's so good. Imagining the two of them. You know, what would afternoon tea look like between Queen Anne and Avon?
Yeah, that would be a really fun crossover event,
Right?
The Favorite and The Wire.
Right?
I feel like there would be some interesting dynamics there.
But
it'd be a good time.
Some things in common when you really think and distill some of the themes.
I'm saying.
So,
Yeah.
Who knew? Who would have knew? Yeah. All right. Well, my one-sentence summary is, get you someone who tells you when you look like a badger.
Honestly, though, like, that is the sign of a good friend. When they have that whole conversation where Sarah tells her, you look like a badger, and then Anne starts to cry, and she's like, you're going to cry? Really? And then, goes on into, I am your friend, and I'm telling you that you look like a badger. Wouldn't you rather not look like a badger?
Mm-hmm.
I was like, yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's good friendship right there.
So good. It's so good. Yeah. You don't got a real one when you come out of the dressing room at the mall with your friends. And surely not every item that I try on looks good on me. I'm going to call bullshit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You need that good friend who's going to tell you the truth.
It's important. Speaking the truth in love. All right. Well, let's dive in to share some of our high-level thoughts about The Favorite, and we will not spoil this movie in the first section, and then we'll include a spoiler alert. So I am so intrigued, Sarah, what your thoughts are about The Favorite. I was thinking about it a lot while watching the movie, and I'm excited to dive into this with you. This will be really fun. What are your thoughts about The Favorite?
Yeah, I was surprised by this film. I didn't know a lot about it other than it was Yorgos, and I knew who was in the cast, and I knew Olivia Colman won an Oscar for her role. That's pretty much all I knew about it. I don't know how I made it this many years after this came out without absorbing any information about this movie. So I didn't realize that this was a comedy. And that was one of the things that really surprised me, is how hilarious this movie is, because it's so funny and it's so smart in how it uses humor as well. And so I had a great time with this. I thought it was hilarious. I had a blast. And I think that there's a lot about this that is just, it's so well done. It's very well written. The dialogue is so witty and quick, which is one of my favorite things. Great performances all around. The costuming is stunning. The sets are beautiful. There's always something interesting to look at. So just every aspect of this, I was just like, oh my gosh, yes, let me just drink this in. So I was just having a great time with these characters, even though they're all messes and they're all dysfunctional. It felt like watching a really weird game of chess where the rules are always changing. And I was just fascinated to see what a character would do next. Like, what move were they going to make? What would they play next? And that kept me really engaged and interested to see what was going to unfold next, because you kind of never know what one of these characters is going to do, or how they're going to respond to a maneuver of someone else. So I found all of that really, really fascinating to watch.
Mm.
So had a great time. uh am kind of upset that I didn't watch this movie sooner.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this was on our watch list for a long time, and just we just never got
Yeah.
around to doing it. But you know what? The opportunities presented itself. We are in the summer of
Yeah.
blockbusters, and sometimes we need a little break to watch something that's
Yeah.
just a different vibe. And we definitely got a different vibe, that's for sure. Uh, yeah, I have a theory about how I feel about Yorgos Lanthimos movies, and I need probably more data points to confirm this. But I think that I enjoy the experience of thinking about the movie after I've watched the movie than I do while watching the movie. Is my current working theory, because I mean, I had a good time with this movie. There's just some like really out there stuff and scenes and like tonal stuff that he often does in his movies that sometimes really works for me. Sometimes I'm just like, oh, this is really out there. And I sometimes get distracted by those things. And I find that my appreciation and love for the movie often grows after I've had a hot second to just like catch my breath after the movie's ended, go make dinner, come back, mull on it a little bit more. And it's almost like the movie opens up more for me after I have time to sit with it, and can really think about some of the choices that he and his team makes in the writing of the characters and some of the plot points. So I think I enjoy thinking about his movies more than I enjoy the actual experience of watching the movie, because there's so much that's jarring and out there, and he really swings big in his movies, and sometimes that can be a lot. So I felt that way about this movie, especially. There's a lot to unpack in the themes in here, and I think especially thinking about these three women and the ways that they are similar in some ways and then also very different, and all of those relational dynamics was really fun to mull on afterwards. And then I just also think there's some like moments in this movie that are so hilarious and so memeable and just pretty iconic. So it was fun to like remember those and kind of giggle at them afterwards. So I overall think that this movie will grow on me more as time passes. So I'm still, I think, processing all that unfolds in this experience.
No, that makes sense, because there's a lot.
Yeah.
I do think it's interesting watching this now. So about 2 weeks ago, I watched Kinds of Kindness, which
Yeah.
is Yorgos's most recent film. I saw it in the theaters, which was a whole experience in and of itself. And that movie, for me, I think was a little too out
Mm-hmm.
there for me. I really enjoyed elements of it, but like structurally I got hung up on the structure, and then the movie didn't make sense to me, and so I was trying to like puzzle the whole time. But when I look at individual aspects of that movie, I'm like, oh yeah, I really enjoyed these parts of it. And so coming off of that, which is it's pretty out there, that movie, then I came and watched The Favorite like 2 weeks later and was like, oh yeah, this is really tame for him.
It is
So
very
like
tame for
I
him.
think I
Yeah.
expected
Yeah.
I expected The Favorite to be like even more out there. Like I think because my expectations were like so wild,
Mm,
even though I didn't know a lot about this movie, then what we actually got, I was like, oh, this
very
is
restrained.
this is kind of normal. This is like almost normie yoga Yorgos. And so I think that that's also interesting to think about how varied his movies are. And I haven't seen all of
Mm-hmm.
them. I need to watch more of his stuff, because I'm so interested in what he creates, because it's always fascinating, even if I don't particularly enjoy watching it. And so I'm curious to continue to work through his filmography and see how these things kind of, I don't know, can talk to each other. You see how some of the things that he's doing in The Favorite, you also see that in Poor Things. So like the fisheye
Yeah.
lens and some of the interesting camera angles
Hmm.
that he and the cinematographer dream up. You know, so I think all of that is really interesting to see maybe in the larger scope of his body of work.
Yeah, totally agreed. Totally agreed. And I was thinking a lot about after this movie ended and like processing through my feelings about this movie too is I think he's the type of creator that his movies deserve a theater experience. I my theory is that I think I would have enjoyed and like given myself over to the experience of The Favorite maybe faster in the movie, earlier in the movie, had I had seen this in a movie theater because I got to see Poor Things in a movie theater and it was also like you're just transported into another world, but it's almost the experience of being in a dark theater and you kind of the ritual of going and get finding your seat and knowing that you are going to experience something that's a lot more immersive, um, kind of prepares you for that transportation into this other very different universe where the rules of how people interact and what's normal and not normal are just wildly different. And I think that the that aspect of like going to the theater is I think a pretty big thing that potentially makes his films even better and even more immersive. Like that immersiveness is potentially important for really experiencing his films fully. It's interesting. People often talk about this in the context of like musical artists. So the one that comes to mind initially is a lot of people talk about Beyonce, like really appreciating all of Beyonce's musical genius needs to be experienced in her concerts and the set design and the choreography and the concert design. And so she is made for this huge scale. And that is where she can showcase so much more of that artistry. She's great on the records and things like that, but to really immerse in all of her musical talent and creative talent requires that scale. And I wonder if maybe for just for me personally, Yorgos is a creator like that. Like to really immerse myself in his worlds actually makes the experience more meaningful and perhaps more efficient in my ability to like just give myself over to it. So I was mulling on that quite a bit after the movie ended.
I really appreciate that in this episode, we have already connected The Favorite to The Wire and
Yeah.
the other queen, Queen Bey.
Yeah.
And I just love that.
Uh-huh.
I'm appreciating these intersections. But I totally agree. I wish that I had seen The Favorite in theaters because
Yeah.
while I very much enjoyed it sitting on my couch, it was a great time. I, while watching, was like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
to have seen this in a theater, particularly with other
Yeah.
humans there. Like when you're watching a comedy, you want to watch it with other people. And so I just thought that this would have been such a fun theater experience,
Yeah.
especially because what The Favorite does visually is so
Mm-hmm.
stunning. And the sound is so important. And the way that this film plays with these beautiful classical music compositions, and then these other moments when it's sounds maybe more than musical notes, and the way that the sound and the music really helps to create the atmosphere. I really wish that I would have seen this in a theater. That would have been a great theater experience.
Oh my gosh, yeah, I totally agree. Especially because there's just such a feast of moments to find absolutely hilarious. And it would be so fun to see who from which parts of the theater are cracking up at different aspects. Like sometimes there's really funny, quick lines that Sarah is, throwing zingers out or Abigail is. Sometimes it's literally like Olivia Colman's facial expression of Queen Anne just like reacting to
Yes.
something or looking
Yeah.
very pained that is like absolutely hilarious. And I just bust out laughing and just watching her operate in this world. And so it'd be fun to see like how different parts of the theater react to the like literal treasure trove of moments that are like, it's a constant stream of comedic bits that are all strung together like a string of pearls, you know? And so that I think would have been really fun to experience in a theater too.
Mm-hmm. Ugh. Okay, so when somebody builds a time machine, one of the stops along the way, we need to go watch The Favorite in theaters. I
Like
mean,
a
we
path
there's a lot of
there.
movies that would be great to see in a theater, but The Favorite should be top of the list.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Agreed. Agreed. Okay. Well, let's include a spoiler alert if you haven't seen The Favorite yet. Uh, we recommend checking it out before listening to the rest of this episode. We also hadn't seen it yet, but it's been many years and it is well worth your watch. So take a note from our books and go check this out finally. Okay. Where shall we dive in first? What was an aspect of this film or moment or theme that really caught your attention?
I think one of the things that I'm really impressed about with this movie is that all three of these women, even though they are dysfunctional, infuriating, just lots going on with all of them, they're all so complex, but they're all empathetic in certain moments.
Mm,
And I really appreciate that even though there are some villainous choices maybe from some of them, I wouldn't label anybody as a villain. And you see their strengths, you see their weaknesses, you see their goals and their desires and why they are doing what they're doing. And even those moments when you're like, man, that feels like really manipulative, that feels really, really bad. Later in the movie, you'll see these moments that will humanize a character. And I found that so smart. And the way that the movie kind of plants these seeds so that you're constantly shifting how you view these women, I thought was really, really effective because they're all three-dimensional, they're all really interesting, and they all have moments when they're hurting each other, but then they also have moments when they seem to care for the other people in their lives too. And I found that to be a really fun and interesting balance that this film is constantly achieving.
mm-hmm. I read someone's review of this film that kind of made me laugh, which is like, in so many movies, TV shows, there's always this like, are you team X or team Y? Like team Edward, team Jacob.
Mm-hmm.
There's a recent Amazon Prime show, The Summer I Turned Pretty, which is like, are you team Conrad or team Jeremiah? Like there's always these like dichotomies. And so the article is like, are you team Sarah or team Abigail? And it's fascinating to think about because obviously they are foils to each other, but it is that close of a match between the two of them. To your point, it's not like Abigail is our primary protagonist and we are aligned loyalty to her as she's trying to take out Sarah, who's in her way and manipulative and conniving and a powerful woman. And she is this, like underdog that is coming in to try and like earn her place. Like we it's not as cut and dry, and we're also not rooting necessarily for Sarah the whole time either, because we can see and understand why um Abigail's story has like sown the seed in her to have that ambition to go after and earn her keep and earn her place, and we're kind of like proud of her for going after what she wants, and so there's this raw ambition and cleverness that we're like, yeah girl, like go get it. And I think that the closely matched nature between the two of them makes this movie exciting because it truly is this battle between two equals, and neither one is necessarily a protagonist. And to your point, our loyalties are also constantly vacillating between the two of them as they make different choices that are maybe questionable or villainous. And then also the moments where we get to see these really real human moments of who they really are. And that kind of tugs at our heartstrings for one of the characters a little bit more closely. So I love how closely matched our two protagonists are. I would say they are both the protagonists. And honestly, the antagonist may be like the systems in place that have caused these women to have to figure out how to survive in these ways. And their survival looks very different. You know, Sarah's trying to protect her place, Abigail's trying to earn her way into a place of comfort and power and self actualization. And they are both operating within the system that has not given them the place to openly be uh, like feeling like they have power and they have agency.
And it's really fascinating to watch how, particularly these two women, but also just everybody in this movie, is trying to calibrate themselves in relation to Anne as well. And I think that that makes for some like really interesting moments when you're seeing, because at first it's kind of like, okay, is Sarah dictating to Anne and kind of like controlling her? And then we see that that's not really the relationship there. And we see Anne making decisions and reacting to things and things not going the way that they think that it's going to go. So I love that she provides almost these moments of chaos as these two other women are trying to really get their spot and get power and all of that. And the one with actual real power who can decide who has power, uh you know, she's going to decide how she wants to decide based on however she feels in the moment. And I found that dynamic to be really, really fun and exciting to follow.
I think you bring up a fabulous point, which is that the tension, the excitement of this movie truly is because Anne is so unpredictable. She's unpredictable for the characters to understand where her loyalties are, and then for us as the viewers, we're like, what is Anne going to do next? And she is also constantly vacillating between her affections for either of the two. And sometimes, you know, she's also clever enough to know when to pit them against each other to create and ignite more affection for herself from one of them and make the other jealous, you know? And so Anne, while she has these like comedic moments where she seems empty-headed or kind of like a fool or silly, she also has these strokes of brilliance in this movie and understands the relational dynamics at play so clearly so that she can play and manipulate within them. So while she's played to be this kind of bumbling character that has you know, maybe is not the most sharp, she is sharp in her own way and in these specific moments, which are pretty pivotal to igniting these jealousies within these two women that are kind of in her orbit.
Yeah, it's such a fun thing to watch. These three women in relationship to each other, because they all have their independent relationships with one another, and then when they all collide, it's very, very fascinating to see. So I loved that moment when uh Abigail becomes Anne's maid, and then they go to the mud bath place, and then Sarah shows up, and you see how they're all feeling each other out, and the way that those relationships change. Because I feel like up until that point, especially Anne and Sarah's relationship, we had seen a lot of business stuff, and we hadn't seen Sarah's affection for Anne, really. And I loved how in that moment we get to see the nostalgia and the history between them, but then we also get to see Abigail's reaction to them and their bond and how it feels for her to be kind of like pushed off to the side. I loved how every scene with these women, we learn a new piece of information that kind of changes the dynamic between the three of them. And it's just constantly shifting and evolving. And it's so fun to watch that, because nothing is static ever in this movie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm going to make another really weird connection point because my brain is firing.
Ooh, I'm so excited. I'm
But
ready.
are you saying that perhaps the favorite also has a lot in common with Succession in that Anne is Logan and in his orbit is the constantly shifting dynamics and loyalties and favor and out of favor positions of the children. And in that same way, we raved about this a ton when we reviewed Succession. Go check that out on our other podcast called TVNS. Shameless plug. But when we
Ooh.
reviewed that on Succession, it was something we talked about like episode by episode, moment by moment. Everyone's position on the board is constantly changing, and some are rising in favor, some are falling out of favor. And it seems like every scene, every conversation, every action that someone takes changes this so significantly. And I think that same tactic is being used here in The Favorite as well. Every scene, every moment when someone makes a play changes their positioning on the board. And sometimes what a character has schemed doesn't go according to plan. So you see that whole bit where Abigail tries to propose that this idea that Sarah has been embezzling money this whole time, and it doesn't work. Like Anne doesn't believe her, and she then creates this mistrust, and she has now maybe fallen a few steps down the ladder with favor with Anne, or created suspicion, and she understands that her play that she planned did not go according to plan. So I love that, like, characters are scheming about their positions on the board. Sometimes those schemes come to pass and it's great. Sometimes they don't, and that it's constantly changing the board's positioning. So The Favorite and Succession. what a weird
I
mental
love it.
space that is to think about.
No, I think it's great. And you worked in an organic plug, which I'm very impressed about. So, like, great job.
Yeah.
10 out of 10. No notes.
I didn't think of it until you were talking about like that constantly shifting positioning of the game board. And I was like, wow, we raved about it a ton not too long ago.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we sure did.
Yeah. One of the things that I think is really fascinating in this movie that I didn't like maybe have the brain and mental space to appreciate as much while watching, but when I was thinking back to it, I was like, wow, that was actually a pretty pivotal moment and small. And I think there's probably so many more of those that like would be so fascinating to rediscover on a second viewing. But the one that really stood out to me was when Sarah, towards, it's in the third act, she comes and threatens to expose the relationship that her and Anne had to the public through the letters. And that is kind of a play, a scheme that she makes and tries to set up to change her and improve her position when it comes to favor in Anne's eyes. And then there's a very short, brief little scene that happens a little bit later where we see her burning the letters. And I just thought that there was so much like meaning and interpretation that people might have of like, why is Anne burning these letters? Is it regret? Is it understanding and finally surrendering that she has lost her position and is accepting her fate? Like, there's so many ways to interpret that little act, but it is kind of a small scene that comes later and I think carries so much meaning and weight. And so then I'm like, man, there's probably so many of those that are littered throughout this film that carry all these different interpretations for how these women are thinking and feeling about their position on the board. So that was one that really stood out to me, that I was like doing the dishes a couple hours later after watching this movie. And I was like, that little moment is actually pretty huge to signal what Sarah is feeling and experiencing and how her perspective about the whole situation is changing and evolving moment by moment.
Yeah, that was a fascinating moment to me. And even how I read that moment changed over the course of like the
Mm-hmm.
remainder of the film.
Yeah.
Because at first when she's burning the letters, I was like, what are you
Yeah.
doing?
Right.
Like that is
That's your card to play.
like that's your yeah, that's your leverage. Like what are you doing? You don't burn that. You don't give that up. What is wrong with you?
Yeah.
And then later when Sarah's being kicked out, essentially, she tells Abigail that they were playing two totally different games. And in that moment, it's like, oh, wait, there was something real here, actually, between Sarah and Anne. And it wasn't just for power or for convenience or fun. Like, it wasn't for anything. There was something deeper
Yeah.
there. And so those burning of the letters, that could have been a genuine moment of regret,
Mm-hmm.
because when she threatens Anne, I don't know, at least the way that I read it, she knew that she did wrong immediately. And so to me, that was almost this like, oh, I regret it. I made this move. It was a bad choice. I'm going to burn it because I don't want to, I don't know, I don't want to risk the relationship more than I already have. It also might be I don't want to risk my power any more than I already have. Um, and so then I don't know, later when you see that scene, and even how Sarah's story kind of plays out for the rest of the movie, you see all of these twinges of humanity, and and it adds complexity to that relationship. And I love that we get hints about what that relationship was like, but we don't fully know. And we get to see that everybody has kind of mixed motives, which I think makes all of those scenes even more interesting, because you can read them so many different ways. And all those readings could potentially be correct, because these relationships are so complex.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think that's what makes this ending so satisfying, is that, one reading of this movie is just like, it's truly just these women scheming against each other to try and achieve power and favor and whatnot. But I think there's so much more to it. Like you mentioned, there's real human emotion involved for every character, all three of them. And that ending is so like significant because I think it's almost like all of the scheming and the manipulation and the masks that people wear could not be sustained. Everything is now laid out clearly on the table. Like you see that Anne understands and realizes what she lost by letting Sarah go. And she understands the depths of that relationship that was real. And she understands that maybe she was played a little bit by Abigail. Abigail also understands that every bit of ambition and scheming to earn the place that she has now of supposed favor did not give her the satisfaction and the security and the joy that maybe she was hoping for by earning her way back into this position of aristocracy and whatnot. Like it's almost like what she wanted wasn't, it was elusive, it was empty in the end. And now she finds herself still controlled, still oppressed by the system in place. And then similarly for Sarah also has that catharsis moment of understanding, like, I I really did care for that relationship. It wasn't about power for me. And there's an understanding that all three of them have for what's really happening now. Like no one's really fooling each other by the end. And there's something that's so satisfying about everything coming to the light and being exposed and clear for each of them. That is satisfying because we've seen the whole 2-hour experience of them maybe pretending and manipulating and being able to have those masks seem convincing. By the end, it's like, no, everything's laid out bare in the open, and we kind of see each other all pretty clearly. Both the depths of a really meaningful relationship and maybe true love and affection that Sarah and Anne had for each other, and then also kind of the schemes that Abigail might have pursued to earn favor that maybe wasn't as satisfying as she was hoping for either.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. I love that moment. And you also see, in that ending scene, you see Abigail, well, before the ending scene, but like Abigail basically stepping on one of Anne's
Yeah.
rabbits. And I don't know, to me, that was the moment where I was like, ugh, Abigail, I no longer like you. Why are you mistreating this poor little rabbit? But you see how that power has gone to Abigail's head
Mm-hmm.
in a way. Like, that's how I
Yep.
read it, is this like, I've curried favor, I have the power, I can do whatever I want, and taking it out on the rabbit, not, and also underestimating Anne's intelligence and Anne's
Yeah.
um how aware she is in that moment, because she's quite frail. Like, she has deteriorated pretty quickly over the course of the film, but she's still with it. And so I do love that sequence where it almost seems like at first Abigail has the upper hand, and
Mm-hmm.
now because she has the favor, then she is in power and she can kind of manipulate Anne and get Anne to do whatever she wants. And I love that the ending is Anne going, no, that's not how this works. Sure, we can have fun. I'll let you do a lot of things, but I am still the queen. I still have the power and I'm still in charge, and you're going to know it. And I found that so satisfying, that particular sequence.
Yeah, no, it is. It's satisfying because you're right. It. I think we would have read that scene so differently without the rabbit and the heels scene that comes right before it,
Mm-hmm.
because we would
Yeah.
have maybe had a lot more sympathy and loyalty and kind of connection to Abigail, and feeling like, oh my gosh, like she's getting abused and stuck in this system again, right? And I think I felt still some of that for her, honestly, but it almost feels like a
Mm-hmm.
sense of um, all is right in the world for her pride and her ego to be in check. Um, and it's tricky because we've learned so much over the course of the movie about Abigail's background, and she, in a lot of ways, has experienced a lot and been thrown out by the system and by her family, by her father gambling her away, all this stuff. And so I think we can kind of empathize a little bit more with why she's got this like raw, like unchecked ambition that feels, I don't know, it just, it's part of the human dynamic to like, I have gone through so much and I'm coming back and I'm gonna get what I want. And so you're right, that ending is satisfying because we get to see the queen kind of keep her in check and be like, hey, like, yes, go after, do your thing, but also don't be fooled, don't be deluded into believing that you are invincible because you are contained within in the system. I don't know. It's that ending is so mixed. I felt very mixed about it.
Mm-hmm. And I think you're supposed to feel mixed. I don't know that there is really a victory in this. I feel like, Sarah is kind of kicked out, discarded, but she is able to retain her life and a good standard of living, and seems to have a pretty good situation going on. Abigail gets what she wants, but it's like, the grass isn't always greener, and this also is not great. And then Anne has, it's mixed for her too. She loses her closest confidant, and that relationship, though she wanted it to be repaired, wasn't able to be. And then she can have fun with Abigail, and Abigail is great, but she also can see the manipulative side of Abigail too. So I love that everybody's ending position is mixed. Nobody is a clear victor, nobody is a clear loser. They are both victors and losers in this movie, which makes, I think, the ending and the film as a whole even more interesting, because there's not really any like black and white or clear cut victory in this.
Yeah, that's so true. That's so true. And yeah, people kind of get where they, I don't know. It just it feels like that's, yeah, all is right, you know? Like no one is deluded beyond where they're actually positioned. Everyone kind of sees their position clearly too.
Mm-hmm.
So not only do we as a viewer see that the characters have ended up in this kind of mixed state, but I think the characters themselves also have the awareness of their positions and the
Mm-hmm.
mixed state of
Yeah.
their positions too, which is also really satisfying in a way. I think I would have felt more dissatisfied if Abigail was still deluded in believing that she had this grand place and had won. No, she knows too that she's gotten some of what she wanted, but not fully. And same thing with Anne as well. So there's the viewer's awareness of their mixed ending positions, and then the characters themselves also have that awareness too, which is extra satisfying.
Yeah, that's a great point. And and is in keeping with the entire film too. You know, everybody is this interesting mixture, and everyone that you encounter has both positive qualities and negative qualities to them, and they're all on full display. And I think that mixedness, for lack of a better term, is what helps make this so interesting, and what makes the characters so interesting to want to follow. Is they're all a mix of multiple things, and you can't put them in a box really, and that makes it fun.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very much so. And I think while watching the movie, I think I was a little bit more focused on Sarah's arc and Abigail's arc. But in the more time that I've had after the movie ended, I was really thinking a lot about how Anne's story arc is also really fascinating because she essentially ends the film with coming to terms with the fact that she has this new person now that maybe is comforting for her, but may not love her with the same depths that Sarah did, and the understanding of what she maybe has given up and traded in for maybe this comforting form of affection and flattery. I was just so struck by that scene. I referenced it in my one sentence summary, but when Sarah is right before she gets sent away and she's talking to Anne through the door, and she says something along the lines of like, Abigail will tell you you look like beautiful and wonderful and you look like light, and she's Sarah says, but sometimes you look like a badger, and I will tell you because I will not lie. That is love. And I was like, wow, that is incredibly deep in such a bizarre set of circumstances and premise, but there's a lot of truth to that. And I think by the end of the film, we as viewers also can see and have felt the depths of their connection and the care they have for each other, that indeed does look different from the way that Abigail relates to Anne. And you see that Anne by the end also understands the difference too between how these two women cared for her and showed up for her very differently. And so Anne's trajectory is almost like understanding and appreciating now what true care kind of looks like, even when it's not comforting. And she kind of traded maybe like that substantive love and care for something that feels a little bit more like cotton candy. And Abigail will stroke her ego and make her feel great, but that's not ultimately what love is. And you can see that I think Anne realizes and understands that much more fully by the end of the film than she did during the full journey that they go on to get there. And I don't know, I was just kind of fixated on that for a little bit too in my cloud of many, many thoughts about this movie afterwards. That was one that really stood out to me a lot.
No, that's really good, and it makes sense to have a cloud of
So
thoughts
many.
afterwards.
A cluster, a spaghetti
When it,
bundle.
yes, absolutely, that is exactly what it is. One of the parts with Anne that I found so fascinating is all of her rabbits. And when she tells Abigail that she lost some 17 children and she has 17 rabbits, I thought that was really, really interesting. And the way that scene is just exceptional. Olivia Colman is just otherworldly. Like, she is such a good actress. And in that moment when she's talking about, I lost some 17 children, and
Mm,
you feel so much the weight of grief in that moment from
mm,
her, even though she doesn't linger on that. And then you see, obviously, like, Abigail and Anne will play with the rabbits and all of that, and spend time with them. And you see how Sarah doesn't touch the rabbits, and or is like very reluctant about the rabbits. And at first it's like, oh, Sarah is no fun, blah, 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 blah. But
mm,
after the movie was over and I was reflecting on it, I was wondering if Sarah, the way that she processes grief is different. And she presumably had walked with Anne through all of those losses, through every miscarriage, every time a child died. Sarah was probably there with her, experiencing not the exact same trauma, but still
Mm,
experiencing that grief and watching her friend walk through
yeah.
hell. And so I wonder if some of that grief is wrapped up in some of the distance that Sarah has from these rabbits, and maybe some of her reluctance to engage in some of those emotions with Anne is
Mm,
just because Sarah's walked through it before. So again, like, you can think one thing about the characters at one point in the movie, but then as you go throughout the movie, your perception of them
changes.
changes
Mm-hmm.
so much,
Mm.
and you see these different sides of them. And I love that. I think a point you made earlier is totally correct. If we were to rewatch this, we would discover so much more upon rewatch because there's so much there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And what's also interesting too, something that I think you touched on earlier too, is that there's obviously these very silly moments, and they're big and larger than life, but there's these like random interjections of these like really meaningful expressions of like a genuine emotion that feels like kind of like this, like I was shocked by it every time. So that scene where Anne is sharing about the miscarriages that she went through, she's so different from like the Anne that we see in many of the other scenes where she's like yelling at someone, or she's kind of deranged or feeling the heat of an emotion. There was such heart in that, the way she expressed about um, that feeling and that experience that she went through that was hard and challenging. And it was just this like breath of humanity in a movie where these characters are all larger than life, and yet this movie constantly reminds us and grounds us in, no, these are real people that have been through things and they feel really real to us. Because I think these characters are so larger than life that the risk is they feel like caricatures and they feel clownish in a way, and they're just silly and ridiculous and they act like children and stuff. But the movie constantly brings us back to these very real experiences that feel universal, that we as the viewers can connect to. And that so therefore we can never run away into the land of believing that these are caricatures and they're silly and then they're not human. No, we are reminded at just the right timing. There's maybe a sequence of scenes where they are so ridiculous, but the timing always comes where we're like, oh no, these are real people with really difficult things that they've been through and experienced, and their feelings are so genuine and real.
Yeah, I think the pacing of this film is absolutely spot on. And it gives us the information that we need when we need it. And and like you said, there are these really, really deep moments that we have with them. But we also get to see moments when we see that they're actually like really good at their job. I
Mm,
loved that moment when they're counseling Anne about like what to do militarily, and she doesn't know, and eventually she actually comes up with an idea that seems to work. And I loved those moments because it's not just them being silly in the court, though there's plenty of that. And this movie is really smart in the way that it criticizes the court and makes light of the
mm,
court and how silly that it was. And it even pokes fun at like period piece dramas, which I loved. But we also get these moments when we see governing happen, and we get to feel the stakes of these decisions. And so when Sarah and Abigail are vying for Anne's attention and her affection, it's not just for them. Obviously it is, but
that's good.
it's
Yeah,
for so much
that's
more
true.
than that. They're also vying for positions politically, and what this means for the country and what it means for the war. And like I appreciate that this film is so smart to talk about the war and the number of lives lost, but and then it also talks about the taxes and how people are responding to taxes. So all of this political maneuvering within their relationships is actually part of this larger macro thing that's happening as well, which just, at least for me, like added stakes to everything that was going on.
That's so good. Yeah, that's very true. And it also adds depth and complexity to some of our characters too. So I'm thinking about that scene where Sarah, I think it's when she blackmails Anne, and she says, I'm doing this for me and for the country that I love because I believe this is best. And so you see that there's these many different ingredients in her convictions and her choices. You're right. It's not just this relational drama. There's actually, it's theoretically a political drama too that we're getting to see unfold, and how we can't actually separate those things either, which is also, I think, some interesting commentary there of the emotional relationships that are built, intersect, and are so um, steeped in the political dynamics as well. So they can't really be separated. Same thing for our political alliances and loyalties and conflicts that happen today too. It's not just true political policy debate and whatnot. There's all these emotional dynamics that really do sometimes get in the way of or help fuel us to be passionate in a certain direction or other. Mm.
And I loved how we see that in Harley as well, um, because he is so silly and he's so over the top. And I, oh my gosh, he's so goofy the whole time. But then he has these moments when he's like, wait, no, I have a job to do. I'm advocating on behalf of the people. Yes, I may be silly. Yes, I may look ridiculous, but I have a point and you will listen to me. And I loved how all of that was infused into this character, and how he kind of oscillates between these two extremes in his personality. And it was fun to see those both coexisting in one person.
Yeah, he's kind of the like other variable that's thrown into the mix that is stirring the pot too, and helping change alliances or pit loyalties against each other amidst the three women here. So he's I feel like watching this a second time will be fascinating to see when he shows up and how his conversations with Abigail and others maybe influences their decision making. I feel like there's a lot there. I did not have time to really fixate on that much, but I'm sure I think there's a lot there too, that is going to be fascinating.
Yeah, this whole movie is fascinating because all of these characters are so interesting. And then when you pit interesting characters together, it just creates for a fun time.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we have in the
Yeah,
favorite.
yeah, very much so. One of the things that I think I will always think of when I think about this movie in the future is that score, particularly that sequence, that musical sequence of like this piano and this string hitting these notes almost like um like a metronome. And it's often in these scenes where we see characters scheming and plotting, and tension is building. It reminds me a little bit of like the beeping from a monitor or something like that, that just it's like this predator slowly walking and stalking its prey. And they use it throughout this movie, but I am going to be haunted by that. And every time I think of this movie, that's just going to start playing in my head because it is so iconic. And I think it fits so well for all of the, scheming that happens within this movie, all of the eavesdropping and back hallway conversations and plotting. It's so fitting for this kind of cat and mouse scheming that is truly happening throughout this movie. So I think that score is highly effective.
And I loved that those moments are contrasted with these really really beautiful musical compositions. Like you have Bach playing one moment, and then in the next scene it's this like two
No,
note
yep.
just back and forth. Like I can't, just these two sounds just over and over and over again. Like it's not even the Jaws score, which is just two notes over and over again. It's more stripped down than that. But it's so effective. And I loved making note of those times when we have this really, really beautiful orchestration of this classical music. And then we go to this quiet two-tone experience, and then we go back to this beautiful classical composition. I loved those changes throughout the film, and how it really, those choices really heighten all of those scenes, and really help capture the emotion that is happening before us.
Mm-hmm. And like you mentioned, unlike Jaws, which kind of picks up and builds tension to this explosive moment with those two notes, this movie doesn't do that. It just stops and conversation happens, and
Mm-hmm.
then we
Yep.
resume the same steady two note back and forth. It almost feels like we're slowly tiptoeing, that feeling of like tiptoeing in the night
Yeah.
is what I envision in my
Yeah.
head. Um, we're back to it again, and then we have a whole sequence and a whole, big set piece, a ball or a big dinner conversation, and then we're back to scheming again. So that sequence never gets pushed into the tension to go anywhere in and crescendo and have it, the relief and the catharsis of something big happening. No, it's kind of this building tension that never gets to be resolved until we really truly make it to the end of the entire movie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's that anticipation of what's going to come next, and I feel like in those scenes too, because the score, you you can't even call it a score, but those two tones, that it's so quiet, and it just, you almost want to like lean in
Mm-hmm.
and just hear what's going on. Like you want to quiet yourself so that you can fully pay attention to what's happening on screen. So I think even in that aspect, it's so effective in like, okay, let's take it all down, lean in,
Mm-hmm.
pay attention, and then we'll go back to full volume later. I found that so effective.
Yeah, it's so good.
Mm, I love it.
Okay, other big things we wanted to mention before we wrap. Time is flying.
Jen, we've covered like 10% of my notes on this film. Like,
I
there's
know.
so much
I
here.
know, right?
This is
It's crazy.
wild.
Mm-hmm.
There's so much to this
Yep.
film.
Yep.
There's so much here. But I would, just for a hot second, I would like to walk down memory lane with you. Just
Oh,
just for a moment.
okay.
So uh the favorite um
Oh,
won some Oscars. You know where
I
I'm going.
do.
I would I would like
Our
for
most
us
favorite
to
year of the
have an
Oscars, right?
opportunity. Yes, I would like an opportunity for us to just air some grievances if we would like,
Yeah.
because I feel like there might be some grievances to air for this year of moviedom.
Oh.
So this was nominated for quite a few Oscars, which was great. Good job, the Academy. Olivia Colman won an Oscar, and I think it won 3 total, if I'm not mistaken.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Notably, it did not win Best Picture
Mm-hmm.
this year. Uh, I'm Oh my gosh, I pulled up the list. Jen, I got to read this list of nominees cuz there's some good nominees in here. Okay, so the nominees for Best Picture for this year are Green Book, Black Panther, Black Klansman, great movie, Bohemian Rhapsody, The Favorite, also great movie, Roma, great movie, A Star is Born, and Vice.
Mm. Mm.
That's a pretty solid crop of
Yeah.
movies.
Yeah.
The movie that won over all of these other pretty strong candidates was Green Book. What are we doing? The
I
Academy? What is this?
am still shocked every time. Like my jaw is still on the floor every time.
I'm upset.
Especially because I know we like refer to it as the Green Book year, but then when you really read the list out loud again, it really is shocking all
Yeah.
over again. You know what I mean?
Yes,
Like
it
let
is.
us be
Yes.
reminded of what was in the running. Not even just that Green Book
Yes.
won an Oscar, because that in of itself is like what is happening. But then you read what could have won. My goodness. My goodness. Didn't this also not win in the screenplay category? I think I did not do my
Hold,
research
please.
well, but I remember vaguely that this Like,
It did not.
yeah, I
Jen.
know. I know. I,
Okay,
yep,
hold please. So, okay,
comedy.
writing original screenplay. This is the category. The nominees. The Favorite, fantastic. Brilliant writing. First Reformed,
Mm-hmm.
great. Brilliant writing. If you haven't seen The Favorite or The First Reformed, go watch it. It's great.
That was on your top 10 list that year, too, I remember, right? Yeah,
Yeah,
you like
I
that movie.
loved that movie. It's wild. It'll mess you up a little bit, but like there's so much to think about with First Reformed. It has some things to say. Roma, fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
Vice, okay, fine. That works. I get it. The winner, Green Book.
Yep. Yep. That's the one that also shocked
Excuse?
me. Yep.
No. Inappropriate. Just no. Can we, okay, in
For
our
the
time
writing
machine where we're gonna
category,
go see,
like for the writing category specifically, that just feels like an even
right?
bigger slap in the face to everyone. Like we want to celebrate. Okay, you want to celebrate the movie. That's already annoying. The writing, you wrote. I don't.
Nope.
No words. We couldn't even like give Green Book Best Picture and give the best original screenplay to The Favorite or Roma.
Right?
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Uh,
Man.
Especially because
The
this is like
Academy
this is
messed
like
up this year.
screenwriting genius happening here in The Favorite
Yes.
in all
Absolutely.
dimensions too. The writing of the characters and the depths of the characters, the pacing of the storytelling and the arc itself, the dialogue down to the dialogue bits and the quickness from like scene to scene to scene. And it's not that there's like one big scene that's like, oh my gosh, that one bit of banter or whatever that was really amazing. No, like every scene is absolutely hilarious. I just
Okay, and I was wrong a second ago. Its only win was Olivia Colman for this year.
oh my gosh, which
It was nominated in like
a bajillion categories.
everywhere.
Yeah. Mm.
But its only win was Olivia Colman.
Yeah. This was 2018, 2019.
So the movie came out in
Okay, so
2018.
it's 2019
So it
Oscars.
was the 2019 Oscars.
Mm-hmm. See, we can't even do the like blanket lame excuse of like, oh, it was a long time ago. We've progressed since then. No, this was not that long ago, people. This was 5 to 6 years
Mm.
ago. Oh my goodness. It is. I do wonder if like the aptitude for something that's a little bit more out there has, I mean, definitely grown over the past couple of years if we look at the nominations. But still, to your point, this is not this. There's a great level of restraint and groundedness in The Favorite, I would say, compared to some of the other things that we've seen nominated. Like this is pretty tame, all things considered.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So there's not even the like, well, there's no appetite for something that's really, I don't know. I, I'm like you see me like grasping for an explanation, and I am not
Yeah.
finding one. I'm trying things out, and then nope, this not doesn't make sense. Wow.
The Academy just got it wrong. Uh, my explanation is that um, a very white and male voting body wanted to show that they were maybe a little bit more with it than they had been perceived as being. And Green Book provided an opportunity to do that, even though it's not a very good movie and very misguided, and the story behind it is shady. So that's my explanation. Is the Academy wanted to look maybe more progressive than they are, and so then Green Book allowed them to do that, or maybe it's a palatable way to talk about race for older white people, and
And
so then it won.
it's it's such a problematic movie. It's literally a white savior
Yeah,
movie.
it's very problematic.
And the backstory, we basically
Yeah,
took advantage of someone's story and didn't include it.
it's very
It's
bad.
fitting for the themes of The Favorite, which is, you know what, people tried to
Yeah.
swing and maybe delude themselves a little bit. And what you instead revealed is that you haven't done the real hard work to really examine yourself
Mm.
clearly. So therefore, that's why this would be the choice that you feel like is to be celebrated. If you really could see it clearly, you would recognize this is a highly problematic movie with a white savior who saves this family from, their gives them a job, employs him, introduces him to culture in the world. And then if you read a little bit of the backstory, you would also be like, well, this is not okay for us to do.
Mm-hmm. Yep. But,
Yeah.
you know, it's great.
Yeah, and the perfect foil for Green Book is the Black Klansman, which is also just hilarious. Like we
Yes.
had it in the
Oh,
exact same year, this
yes.
like scathing, like
Mm.
unafraid, fearless, bold, in your face with the hard
Yep.
truths, but also like leaving much room for humanity too, but also not afraid to like kind of, call us out on our shit. That one is not the one that anybody really acknowledged that year. So the perfect foil was present as well, which doesn't help Green Book's case either.
Yeah, definitely not.
Yeah, we've got Sarah and
Yep.
Abigail, and
So,
we've got Green Book and Black Klansman. Literally.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have movies that are examining power dynamics within our society.
Yeah.
Uh yeah, and they just sidestepped it all and went, okay, this is like Driving Miss Daisy, but
Mm-hmm.
in
Yeah.
2018. And so we're going to go with
Yep.
that.
Yep.
Uh,
It was.
so I'm still upset about that Oscars.
Yeah.
So thank you for being upset with
Oh,
me
it's so fun to
about
be
this.
upset together.
It's true.
Well, what gave me much hope, which was really great to see after that year's Oscars, is we're going to end on a high here, is
Yes.
to see the social medias and the film world and reviewers and critics really also call the Oscars out and the Academy out for saying like this is problematic. And the whole Oscar so white wave that happened, and really pushing for the Academy to evaluate its voting body and think about and consider what films it's celebrating versus not. I kind of loved how the public and people who are movie lovers, people who are not movie lovers, all showed up to say, this is not okay. We can do better, and we will demand better. And that system of openness and sharing opinions, I think, is really healthy. And we've seen the fruits of that in the past couple of years. So it was great to see that. And that the public wasn't also like, oh my gosh, yay. Like, no, we all collectively agreed this was not great, and we need to do better. So that was encouraging to see. We've got a public that is informed and woke and unafraid and fearless in calling out things that are wrong when we see them. So I suppose the silver lining.
Mm-hmm. Honestly, I love to see it, and that is the counterpoint to a line that Sarah says in The Favorite when she
Mm.
says, "People are led, they do not lead." And in this
The
case,
people
he
led.
said to the Academy, "Nah, dude, we're gonna lead, and we're gonna call you guys out."
Yeah.
And we still have a long ways to go, but we are moving in the right direction
Mm-hmm.
for the Academy.
Mm-hmm.
So we love to see it.
Yep.
Take that, Sarah. 2019 Academy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Perfect. All right. Any other last big thoughts before we wrap?
There are too many. So we can just call it a day. We've aired our grievances.
This will be one that we can add to our little collection, our little special list of movies that we end our conversation with saying, man, we just scratched the surface of this. An
Yeah.
hour has flown by. I distinctly remember we had that overwhelming sentiment at the ending of Tar. So you know what? We're just going to add this to our special little collection of films that we will, at some point, I'm sure, revisit, rewatch again, just for fun, just because, and dive into it again. So more to come. But for now, this is our review and discussion of The Favorite. You can find it available to stream on multiple streaming platforms. Thank you for listening to today's episode of Movies and Us. Our name sums it up. We're all about movies and the powerful ways we can connect with each other and the world around us. This podcast is about all of us and our shared stories, so everyone is welcome here, and we're so glad that you spent time with us today. You can subscribe to this podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you tune to your favorite shows. Drop us a rating and review, letting us know your thoughts about The Favorite. You can connect with us on Instagram, Threads, and TikTok at @MoviesAndUsPod, or you can email us at moviesandUsPod@gmail.com. We will be back next week to discuss the film Trap. We hope you have an amazing week, and we'll talk again very soon.